Okay, let's call to order the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting of Wednesday, February 24th, 2021. Please call the roll.
Chairperson Mateo,
I am here.
Commissioner May,
You're muted.
Here.
thank you. Commissioner Hennigan,
Here.
Commissioner Marhul,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Pelletier,
Here.
and Commissioner Matthews.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Attorney Mars, you have something for us?
Sure. Due to the ongoing public health emergency and consistent with the governor's most recent emergency declaration, various executive orders he has entered and recent amendments made to the Open Meetings Act, President Sells has determined an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent at this time, and therefore this, like the village board and other meetings, is being conducted electronically. If at any time commissioners are having trouble hearing, send Sonia a message through Zoom or speak up. I want to make sure you can hear each other at all time. Same for members of the public. And with that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes of December 21st, 2020?
I had one correction on that.
Let's get the motion on the table, please, first.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Okay, discussion. Commissioner Miller, please.
Yes, there was just one reference. I don't quite see where it is, but it was it referenced tree line and it should have been trees. It was something like in the 4th paragraph. Actually, I don't have the minutes in front of me right now. It's talking about where the antenna was going to be placed.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
All right, Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Pelletier,
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews,
Aye.
Commissioner May,
Aye.
Commissioner Hennigan,
Aye.
Commissioner Marhul,
Aye.
Chairperson Mateo.
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Okay. Are there any visitors who would like to speak at this time? Okay. Trustee Pollock, do you have a village board update for us?
No updates, but I would just let the commissioners know that the matter on your agenda tonight regarding home occupations, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the board's direction in that regard or the board's discussion. I'll be available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The board did approve the tower at Public Works at a recent meeting, yes?
Mhm.
Okay. Moving on to old business, remand from the village board, further discussion and recommendations on allowing habitable space in and above detached garages and coach houses. Director App.
Yes, so staff, we took your recommendation from your last discussion back in November to the village board and let them know that the commission did not feel that there was sufficient need to be changing the bulk regulations in order to allow for the offices above garages. And at their meeting, the village board agreed that they did not believe that it was unreasonable to allow home office uses in a detached garage and asked that the Planning and Zoning Commission discuss it further. They also did not necessarily see the need to really adjust the bulk regulations, especially regarding height. However, they rather suggested that restrictions be incorporated to prevent the conversion of the space into a dwelling unit, but they wanted you to reconsider again allowing the office uses. They also asked that we consider increasing the maximum size for detached accessory buildings. They mentioned that they had received some complaints regarding the maximum restriction of 800 square feet and asked that given that we're suggesting that people can be putting offices in the garages either as an addition to the garage or space above the garage, that perhaps that additional space could be warranted. So with that being said, In order for an office use to be allowed above the vehicle parking spaces, section 1073A3 is going to need to be amended to allow habitable or living space there. Landmark coach houses are allowed to be used for residential purposes and may be occupied as accessory dwelling units. It further states in that section that kitchen and bathroom facilities are permitted in those accessory structures. So 1073A3 could be amended to regulate residential and storage uses for accessory structures and allow for a living space above the parking area. But then we could put some sort of restriction on there saying that only a kitchen or only a bathroom, something along those lines, to kind of limit the amount of plumbing happening in that accessory building to minimize an illegal conversion into an accessory dwelling unit. And that's kind of what the board discussed, is what could we put on there to help make it explicit that it can't be, that it won't be converted into a dwelling unit. As for maximum size, maximum accessory building areas are very common. I provided you guys with kind of some comparable communities that we were looking at in regards to garages. That was like Hinsdale, Western Springs, LaGrange and LaGrange Park, and Brookfield. So Riverside, we allow 12% of the lot area not to exceed 800 square feet for accessory buildings in the aggregate, actually. So that would be if you had like a greenhouse and a garage, or a shed and a garage, that in the aggregate could not exceed 800 square feet. Some of the other communities like Hinsdale just limits it by percentage of lot area. So theirs is 10% of lot area. Western Springs, 10% of lot area. LaGrange does it with a maximum size depending on the lot size. So theirs is either 484 or 660 square feet, and there's like a cutoff by lot size for those. LaGrange Park does it by required yard. So a detached accessory building or garage cannot exceed 50% of the required rear yard. And in Brookfield, it's similar to ours, where it's a 10%, but not to exceed 440 or 660 square feet, whichever is less. So that's kind of what some of the other communities are doing in relation to accessory buildings or detached garages. We're a bit more generous in some, allowing the 12%. However, that is tempered by having that 800 square foot maximum. When we look at the 800 square foot maximum, that is larger than what some of the other communities that have a specific square footage maximum have. So I also provided some background information about what some typical garage sizes are. So you can see like a 2-car garage, you're looking at 360 to 440 square feet for kind of your typical 2-car garage. 3-car garage, you're looking at 560 to 660 square feet. 4-car garage, 792 to 800 square feet. Sometimes they're a little bit larger than that. So we could switch to strictly a percentage maximum that would allow larger lots to have larger accessory structures. If you look at kind of like our minimum lot size based on our zoning districts, like so our R3 and R4 districts have a minimum lot, or an R2 I think as well, have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, whereas the R1A is 7,000 and the R1AA is the 10,500. So if we kind of look at those and what 12% of those lots would be for a 5,000 square foot lot, you're looking at a maximum 600 square foot garage. 7,000 square foot lot, 12% of that is going to be 840 square feet, and 10,500 square foot lot, 12% is going to be 1,260 square feet. So the other could be that we could do it similar to how Brookfield and LaGrange do it, where you set a maximum size for different lot sizes. So you could look at doing a maximum of like a 440 square foot garage for any lots that are less than 7,000 square feet. And then for lots that are 7,000 to 10,500, you could allow a larger garage, say more like a 3-car garage, 660 square feet. And then for those that are the 10,005 or larger than 10,005, you could allow something larger, like a 840 square foot garage. So those are kind of some of the different ways we could look at regulating maximum size a little bit differently than we do now. In either of these scenarios, though, our maximum building coverage and impervious surface coverage regulations would still temper, would still be applied and would still kind of temper what somebody would be able to do on their lot, looking at things in the aggregate. Let's see. So I did provide you with the regulations for accessory structures, for accessory buildings, and kind of highlighted some of those relevant areas. And then I did provide you with a link to the village board meeting so you can kind of see what their discussion was on the matter. But, they're looking for you to come back to them with a recommendation on a text amendment that would allow garage offices in some capacity. So just kind of looking for your feedback on this and some direction to staff so we can prepare a text amendment to come back to you and then be able to take to the village board for review. And then if they're happy with it, then they would direct you to go to for staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission to move forward with a public hearing on an actual text amendment.
Sonia or Commissioner Chairperson Mateo, could I ask the Director Apt a question?
Of course.
Could you go, or is it possible to go into greater detail about what the complaint was that 800 square feet was not enough? What was was it just a comment? Was there anything additional detail that the individuals gave?
My understanding is that they needed to build a larger garage than they had in order to accommodate their family and new family that was coming in. So I don't know if it was in-laws or parents or something. So between their cars, their kids' cars, and then the in-laws' cars, well, they were getting to a point where they would not be able to fit all of those cars in a maximum 800 square foot garage. And so they have a very large lot, I think was the complaint, like we have almost a half acre, I think was the statement. We should be allowed to do something greater than 800 square feet. Our lot can certainly accommodate it. So I think that was more the issue that happened with that. And then the kind of snowballing of that is, well, if we're going to be encouraging people or allowing people to utilize these as office areas, do we maybe need to look at increasing the size of them to be able to allow for that as well?
So just to clarify, the 800 square foot limitation was not related to an office use. It was just the usability of the space as a garage. So really this 800 square feet has nothing to do with office space or additional habitable space, whatever we're calling it right now. Thank you. Can I ask Trustee Pollock? Trustee Pollock, the direction is a text amendment, but I'm struggling with the idea that our rules, our ordinance already allows for the use. So what is the change that we're really looking, or that the board is really looking for? Something more explicit, or I'm a little confused because I watched, I think I might have missed the last 5 minutes of the discussion, but direction, I guess.
Sure. Well, first, I think I'd be a little bit more nuanced in how I describe the board's discussion and direction. I would not describe it as asking the commission to recommend a text amendment allowing offices in detached buildings, but rather just to get your input on it. I don't think there's any preconceived notion that we need to be allowing this. It's just rather seems like a good idea on the surface to allow home occupations to occupy space in a detached building. But at least my impression was that previously the commission had considered it on the basis of expanding the size or the height of an accessory building, and it was clear that the board has no desire to do that, and that it was clear the Plan Commission had no desire or did not recommend expanding the height of an accessory building to accommodate home occupation. But in the discussion at the board level, it was noted that carriage houses, historic carriage houses, are allowed to have offices on the second floor or the first floor, and are allowed to have plumbing. for that office or domestic or guest house or whatever. And so the question was, well, why not allow, if you have an existing two-story building, it should be clear that an office is a permitted use. But I think the village attorney said that yes, under the existing code, you can do that. But then it was, I think our thinking was that the only thing that prevents a home occupation from occupying a detached building, why can't a home occupation operate out of a detached building? Why can't you build an office in the footprint or within the bulk regulations of the code? And then the issue was brought up, well, plumbing would not be allowed. And I questioned whether or not, and I don't know, if I don't have an opinion on this, but would it be okay to allow plumbing in a detached building? I know some people have pool houses. I don't know about Riverside, if there's pool houses in Riverside, but in other towns you have detached buildings that are pool houses that have plumbing. And I don't know if that's allowed in Riverside, but we just open-ended. We certainly want to get your objective recommendation, but I think the board generally was in agreement with Trustee Gisa's conceptual thought that if there's room to expand, even just a little bit, if there's room to expand home occupations to accommodate the new trend of working from home, then we want to do that. If the cons outweigh the pros of doing that, then certainly we would reconsider.
Director
Thank
App,
you.
currently offices are allowed in accessory structures, correct?
Yes, so our home occupation ordinance does allow for them to utilize either the principal or the accessory building. It does limit it to 25% of the total floor area.
Okay. So the way I saw it is we have three main issues to discuss tonight: whether to change the rule that above the cars, you can only have storage. Will we consider allowing plumbing in accessory buildings? And then the maximum accessory building area.
I
Is
have
that
a
correct?
question regarding the plumbing issue. I sent Sonia a question about this. I don't know if she got a chance to look at it. Maybe Trustee Pollock knows the answer, but I don't see anything in the code or the building code that says you can't have plumbing, toilets, kitchen, whatever in an accessory structure.
So ours doesn't explicitly prohibit it. However, in practice, we have limited plumbing fixtures going into an accessory building to make sure that it does not become an accessory dwelling unit. So, people do have heated garages. I think there have been a couple where they put like a sink in it because they've got a workshop area in there. But since I've been here, we've never approved a bathroom in an accessory building. I think the most I've approved is a sink.
So that's just by practice. That's just by people being dissuaded from doing it. It's not legally
Well, they
disallowed
couldn't
for someone
put
to put a toilet in their garage if they want to have a toilet, or their
True.
pool house. So from my understanding, we don't need to change that. One thing I would like to explore a little bit is if we do this, there's going to be, I assume, a variety of health and safety issues, such as it's cold. So people are going to presumably will want people to have insulation and other heating. What about space heaters? What about issues like that? So I think that should be something that would need to be explored either in the code or in the building code more likely, or through the permitting process.
Okay, so let's take these one at a time. Let's continue with the plumbing in the accessory structures, bathrooms and kitchens. Are we in favor of that? And if so, to what extent? Director App told me before the meeting that Hinsdale and LaGrange allow them. LaGrange Park and Western Springs, for example, do not allow them.
Commissioner Mateo?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So to stick on the plumbing issue, if you're asking, I don't know if you're asking us if as individual commissioners, if we're for or against, and I think you are. I'm against it. I mean, this is, where I see the term habitable, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, structure throughout this. Once you add, plumbing, you've made somewhere livable. You've made it into somewhere that could be used, for someone to live there. So to me, it completely changes the dynamics of what you're building here. I mean, to Commissioner or to Mr. Pollock's, Trustee Pollock's point, I mean, I know for a fact there are pool houses in Riverside that do have plumbing. I'm not sure, where they fit into this. I suspect it's more of a special use type scenario, or scenario where you have an in-ground pool, you can have a pool house. But to allow plumbing into any new dwelling beyond, like, as we said, a sink, if you have a workshop, to me is just, it's a dangerous precedent. I just don't, I see this going the wrong direction. Maybe not now, maybe not in 5 years, but maybe in 10 years. And I think, someone, it wasn't me who came up with this. I think it was someone in this commission that says, our responsibility is not only the here and now, but to what impact our decisions could have in the future. And that would be my concern.
Thank you, Commissioner Matthews. Anybody else? Commissioner Morrow?
Two thoughts. One, there was a reason, and I think a good reason, that the village limited coach houses to just the historic structures, and that was specifically to avoid the risk of a second dwelling on a property. And so I would argue that that's established, that the only places that we can have full-blown dwelling units are historic coach houses, nowhere else. Second thing, and then the other is, I've been mulling this over and I'm in complete agreement with Commissioner Matthews, is once you bring in anything more than a sink, there is high likelihood that the privilege gets abused, and then it does become a second unit. Whether or not it's a very nice second unit or not, it ends up that way. And I don't see the need to go down that road. Yes, we all have bodily needs, but I think that it's pretty easy to walk from your garage or exterior office back to the house. We're not keeping anyone from using that accessory building as an office use without plumbing. My
Thank you.
2 cents.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes, I thought about that, but let's say you have your post-college student coming back and they're going to go and live in your office space. Well, I don't think they'd have a problem walking over to your main house to use the toilet. So I don't think that's really going to stop people from using these as dwelling places. If you allow it to be heated, and there are heated garages right now, you can have one of those outdoor showers. You can put it in the garage space and the floor drain so someone can use a shower. And if you have a sink. So I think the only way you get around this is if you don't allow the garages to be used only, or any accessory structure to be used only for not habitable, but non-human use, for storage or for storage of cars. You have to not have, any plumbing. I mean, if as long as you, there's always a way for someone to get around it. And I'm not saying someone's going to be renting their space. So the only way to prevent it is through enforcement. And so I think if you want to go down this road, you have to make a commitment to enforcement, and perhaps legally there's a way to have the current homeowner to sign a commitment that this will not be used for overnight sleeping or habitability other than office space. There's a way to put that in the regulations, and then perhaps there's a way to have that run with the title of the property so that future owners are on notice that legally they can't do that, and then there has to be enforcement.
I'm not so concerned with the idea of a family member, crashing on the couch for a month when they're home from school. I'm quite sure there's plenty of college kids occasionally napping in the garages anyway. The issue would be someone moving in there on a regular basis, and that's where you're not going to want that person coming into your house to use the bathroom. It's going to be either a more distant relative, a buddy down on their luck, or maybe you're just renting it out. So, I still, this concern, I think I think prohibiting any bathroom fixtures other than a sink would really go a long way to preventing these properties from being abused in the future.
Other commissioners? Commissioner May?
I'm in agreement with what Commissioners Matthews and Marhoul have laid out. I think that's limiting to a sink is probably the way to go. Once you've got a plethora of plumbing inside of an outdoor space, you need to start heating it and conditioning it, and it gets daisy chained into habitable space pretty quickly. So I think if you limit it to just basically a workshop sink that's turned on and off with a shut-off valve, that's probably the way to go.
Commissioner Pelletier, any thoughts?
Just that I don't see any compelling reason to change the code the way it is in order to make it easier for someone to install plumbing in their garage or in their accessory buildings. If someone wants to use their space as an office, they can do that. I don't think that we need to do anything to make that any easier. We certainly don't want to encourage, people opening a home business and having kind of outside employees coming in. I think our intention is really just to use it as a home office for the occupants of the primary residence. And I think that our code adequately allows that.
Thank you. Commissioner Hennigan?
I would really just second everything that Commissioner Pelletier just said. I don't know of any reason why I would want to encourage additional plumbing fixtures in a garage.
Okay. Just to play devil's advocate, in case you didn't get to watch the board meeting or read the minutes, if Trustee Gisa were here, he would say, I've got a partner at home working, and I've got kids that are studying at home, and I'm working in my office in my garage. I don't want to have to come inside and interrupt everything that they're doing to use the bathroom or take a shower. So that's his perspective. I'm just presenting what his argument has been for wanting plumbing, which is partly why this discussion is coming back to us. Commissioner Marhoul?
Understood, and I took some notes on Commissioner Gisa's commentary. And
Trustee Gisa, I'm sorry.
Trustee, sorry, no offense meant. He's got some good points in terms of we're not here to address issues of cost or aesthetics, but on the issue of the work from home current issue, kids being at home, I am not, and I'm just going to read what I wrote because it's easier. I'm not willing to make changes to the zoning code on the basis of predictions about the impacts of COVID. I think there's a fair amount of opinions on what the future looks like post-COVID, where people are going to work, what office and home look like. But the issue of everyone being in the house, everybody's dealing with that right now. I think it's a pretty unique circumstance. It is a unique circumstance that's specifically related to the pandemic, and kids and two working spouses partners being at home is, I don't think that justifies a change to the code to address the issues that were brought up. As John said, as Commissioner Matthews said, we need to be looking 5 years out, not in the current situation. There's addressing COVID is a problem, and being in plenty of Zoom meetings like this for work, everybody's got these issues. They're not unique. Nobody likes it. Everybody hates it. The dog's gonna bark. But there is a light at the end of that tunnel, I think. And that is not a good reason to be changing the zoning code.
Commissioner Miller, then Commissioner Hennigan.
My understanding is that right now someone could have an office in an accessory structure. They could have plumbing there. People keep saying we don't want to encourage plumbing, but they could do it if they were at all, interested in looking into it. They could do it unless the village staff prevents them and says, well, this really isn't proper. And the zoning code right now says you can have accessory structures that take up to 12% of your lot. So what we're doing is, for people with larger lots, we're saying, well, actually, it's not 12% for you. It's only whatever it would be, 8% or something like that. So that's what we're talking about here. So that's the only, to me, that's to the extent that we're talking about changing the zoning code, is simply taking out that 800 square foot limitation on larger lots. This isn't going to apply to smaller lots. I don't think it's really going to apply to R2 or even R1A, really. It's only going to apply to the very large lots. And I think if people own those properties and everyone else can use 12% of their lot for accessory structures, and they're still limited by 30% overall for building coverage, I just don't see that it's quite, I guess the word is fair or equitable to say, no, you can't do that. And if we're worried about enforcement issues, well, that's sort of on village staff, as limited as it may be, to prevent that, or on the neighbors saying something like, look, this is not a home occupation. It's not just someone who is a resident there working there. I see cars going in and out all the time. I see UPS trucks. I see whatever. So that's how I see it. I don't really see that we're being asked to do significant changes to the zoning code. And just one more point on that. I don't really understand the issue of needing to change the reference to storage area above a garage trusses, because as far as I can see, unless you have if you have sidewalls on the garage that are 12 feet, even if you have a low ceiling of say 9 feet, if you have a limit on a peaked roof of 16 feet, you're talking about 7 feet. I just don't see that that's really necessary. I don't understand that issue myself, why we need to change that to eliminate.
We'll take that one up next.
Storage.
We'll take that one up next.
Okay.
Commissioner Hennigan.
A question for Sonia. Has the Community Development Department received any applications for people wanting a permit to do a home office with plumbing or expand their garage greater than 800 square feet to accommodate a home office? Or is this all just a theoretical discussion?
I've not had one for somebody that wants to do like full plumbing in a garage. So I have had garages that have come in where they've wanted to create a studio on the back of it. So they've done like an additional 10 feet so they can have, like a workshop or a studio. They've heated the garage. They've put in a sink in the garage, but they didn't even come in and say, hey, I want to put a bathroom in here. They just said they wanted to put a sink. So there really hasn't been staff hasn't really had to put any pushback in that. We have had inquiries where people have said, hey, I've got this old house I'm looking at buying and it has an old coach house in it. Can I convert that? Can I, update that coach house so that it can have that dwelling unit in it? And if it's in those cases, they haven't been landmark coach houses. So I've had to tell them, no, they can't do that. So we have had a couple of inquiries about that for some houses in town that do have old coach houses in the back, but they're not landmarked. I've not had any we've turned several people down for garages that are greater than the 12% or the 800 square feet over the years, but none of them have come in for a variance when I've been here. And it hasn't even necessarily been that they've needed additional office area. Maybe they have. I'm not always the one that's, I haven't been the one that's consistently played gatekeeper on that. My building inspector did that job as well. So they may have been interested in having like an additional office area, but I have a feeling typically it's, I want a 4-car garage and I want space to put my garbage cans and storage. And so it, ends up kind of pushing that envelope where it's bigger than the 800 square feet.
Okay, so in the past year, you haven't seen people coming in asking for this, that they want to do it on their property?
Only the coach houses in the past year.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any interest in making explicit that no plumbing beyond a sink is allowed? So no showers, no toilets, no kitchenettes, or just keep things going as they have been?
I would support changing the code to specify sinks only. If that's been our policy, I would like to see that codified to have let staff have something better to fall back on.
Others? What do y'all think about that? Commissioner Miller? You're muted.
Sorry. I'm totally fine with having a toilet in a garage space or a pool house or any accessory structure, if for no other reason that I think for someone using their property and having workmen over or whatever, could be very convenient to have that kind of a facility outside your house, not just for a home office use, but a shower or, a bathtub, that kind of thing is. So basically a traditional powder room would be fine with me.
Other commissioners?
I'm with Commissioner Hennigan on this. I don't see the need or demand. I don't see how this is going to provide a beneficial future result. I think the danger of any major plumbing is that it will get converted into something more livable. And once you're in powder room stage and you've put in a 4-inch sewer for the facilities, it's not much of a stretch or much of a conversion to make the kitchen happen too. And it would happen under the table, but it would probably happen.
Dr. App, I should probably have started by asking you, is there a convention across villages that are the codes relatively silent and it's through the individual who's permitting things or what?
I don't think codes are typically very explicit about you can have a kitchen but not a bathroom. I haven't really seen too much of that. Typically what you're seeing is that they're not allowing accessory dwelling units. And so it is incumbent upon the village to be looking at the plans for those garages and making sure they're not putting in fixtures that are going to turn it into a dwelling unit. So it's kind of happening more at the review level. So when you see somebody building a big garage and a second story on it, then you're looking at it and making sure, that they're not adding those fixtures to it. So Attorney Mars, are you familiar with anybody having specific restrictions on it?
Sure. Well, in working with Hinsdale, I know that they have the prohibition on dwelling units, but they will allow, for instance, bathroom and plumbing fixtures or kitchen fixtures. They just won't allow both because then you're creating a dwelling unit. And it's a little bit challenging there. So one advantage that Riverside has is you have transfer inspections. So when a property is changing hands, there's an actual compliance inspection to make sure there's not those kind of violations, whereas Hinsdale doesn't have those. So, people definitely kind of push the limits in terms of what they do with their garages there. But you guys have more of a safeguard in terms of the transfer.
So then would the two of you, were you to make a recommendation, recommend that we leave it as is and let staff review take care of it?
If the plumbing provisions are not explicit, I would probably recommend that they be made explicit one way or another.
Okay, so I'll keep asking. I've heard from Commissioners Marhoul, Hennigan, and Miller. Other opinions? So some have said sinks are okay, nothing more. One have said sink and toilet are okay.
I would say sink is fine with me. Beyond that, we're kind of opening more doors here because we do raise the issue of pool houses. I mean, do those fall under the definition of accessory structure here? Or is there and I don't know the answer to this, is there a separate part of the code that speaks to pool houses? Because certainly for pool house, one would think that a shower and a toilet is probably okay because that's a different beast. So it does, every rock we turn over reveals something else.
So at least on my end, you broke up a little bit in the beginning. Did you say you're okay with sinks and you would leave it there?
I'm okay with sinks, yes.
Okay.
Did you hear that? And then my
Yes,
issue
thank
though is where do pool houses fall in?
Director App, did you want to chime in on that at all?
So, I mean, a pool house is an accessory building, so it'd be treated like a garage or any, a shed or anything like that. So I think similarly, those would be looked at as that we're not creating the dwelling unit. So we're looking to make sure that there's not the kitchen, there's not the bathroom, there's not the combination of those things. So if they just have a shower in there, then that's not an issue. I don't really know. I have not been in any of the pool houses in town. I know we had one that was recently built, but they didn't put any plumbing in it. It's really just more of a cabana than it is an actual like what you would think of as a traditional pool house. So it didn't have any plumbing or anything put in it. So it just had large sliding doors that could go across the front of it to enclose it when it needed to be, and had some electricity in there, but there was no plumbing put into it. Other ones that are out there, hopefully they don't have a kitchen and a full bathroom that would be considered a dwelling unit.
Commissioner Pelletier, Commissioner May?
I'm with Commissioner Hennigan that it needs to be codified one way or the other. It can't be an unwritten rule that we don't allow it. So if we're gonna say do a restriction to just sinks only for accessory units, perhaps there's an exception then that's also written down that says pool houses can have something. But either way, nothing's more infuriating than somebody saying that, I'm sorry, it's just an unwritten code rule that everybody knows about, but it's not written down anywhere.
Yeah, I agree that it needs to be codified. I personally feel like a sink and a toilet, like a powder room type setup, would be reasonable, particularly for instance, for the pool house situation. I think a shower is not advisable. So I don't know if there is a way to restrict it by like the number of fixtures, the true plumbing fixture number. But I would say a sink and a toilet would make sense.
I think the easiest way to address the pool house issue and potential habitability thereof is to have a much harder limit on the rest of the space. Because if you just have a whatever size pool house plus a bathroom, which is what it ends up being, a powder room, if it's small enough, it can't become habitable, or certainly would be very unpleasant to be in. But the bigger issue is when you put a powder room in a garage and then you've got all that extra space to expand into.
So are you saying limit the size of the bathroom?
No, sorry, I wasn't clear, and I realized that I kind of left it open-ended, but I would limit the size of that structure.
Pool
If you
house.
want a
Yes.
full, if you want a full powder room in this pool house, then what, a powder room is 5 by 5, 150 square feet. You don't get much. Otherwise, it will become a living space. And that, I think that's what we're really worried about, right? Is it becomes an ADU.
So we have 3 commissioners who want sink only. 4 commissioners that want sinks only in garages. 2 commissioners that are okay with sinks and toilets. And then 1 commissioner who's okay with a very small pool house powder room.
I'm perfectly willing to, I was trying to give an option for the powder room. I would rather not have it at all, and I'd rather stick with just the sink, to be honest. But I was trying to be open to other ideas.
Well, since we're really, the charge here was to initially talk about garages, even though garages are accessory structures and there's all kinds of accessory structures. I would be, I'm kind of guilty, I think, of leading us a little bit astray here once I start bringing out pool houses and things like that. That's something I would say that's not what we're looking at now. We're just looking at garages, what we're going to allow, but then I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. There's an accessory structure, but I would be fine just with a text amendment to the effect that the only a sink is permitted in accessory structures. And then if it ever comes down the road where we have to deal with people who want to put something else in, they can either seek a variance or we can do another text amendment or something like that. But at least as Commissioner Hennan and several others said, we should codify this at least to, at least put something in there about plumbing. Without anything in there about plumbing, this is not helpful to anyone. And we're in a, the way statutes are construed, if it doesn't mention it, the sky's the limit.
Attorney Morris, do you want to chime in here about the discussion at the board meeting about the likely success of variation requests in this scenario?
Sure. Yeah. My feeling is for the type of things we're talking about, hey, I've got a home business. Hey, I've got, a kid home from college, whatever. Variations would be very difficult to get because those are personal circumstances. So I think, somebody coming in for a variation to get a shower or whatever, if it's prohibited, would be an uphill climb for sure.
Thank you.
And while we're at it, in terms of the accessory structures and garages versus pool houses, I think, within accessory structures, I think we could certainly figure out a way to distinguish between, an area where cars are stored and a pool house. So if you guys wanted to maybe just address what limitations you want in garages, we can call that out in the code and leave the pool houses a little more open-ended.
I would absolutely favor that. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. And I think Commissioner Matthews' commentary about variation, the variation process is always available. It is a higher hurdle, and there's a reason for that. But I think Commissioner Matthews hit it on the right spot. And if someone comes in wanting a pool house with more extensive facilities, then that option is there for them to come in and make this suggestion or request, and then also prove with that variation request that this can't become an accessory dwelling. That's always available. It's never gone away. So the more specific line that Commissioner Matthews and my other fellow commissioners are suggesting, I think is the right way to go.
Commissioner Miller?
I really wanted to ask what Mr. Mars was talking. I was a little confused about that, but first I just wanted to say, it sounds like where we're going is you couldn't have any kind of toilet facilities in a pool house or anything. And yes, clearly there's no way you could ever get a variance to allow a toilet in an accessory structure if it's barred. But one of the questions I had, I was a little confused about the discussion of just addressing garages, but also I noticed that in the home occupation standards in D6, paragraph D6, it talks about the home occupation shall not exceed 25% of the total floor area of the principal and or accessory building. And I'm wondering if we should be addressing that, or someone, the community development department should be addressing that. There's a couple of things I'm a little confused with. I think it's unclear when it says shall not exceed 25% of the total floor area of the principal and or accessory building. I assume what it's saying is not more than 25% of the principal building if the office is in the principal building, not more than 25% of the accessory building if it's an accessory building. And I'm further wondering if, since you could have multiple accessory buildings that could add up to, on a large lot, 1,260 square feet, and the office might not be put in the garage, it might be put in the pool house, it might be put in a shed, it might be put in a freestanding other building, whatever we want to call it. I'm thinking it's probably advisable to address that 25% limitation somehow. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we may not want to say, you can't build an accessory structure just to have your home office. But I think people probably should be allowed, they shouldn't have to put their home office in a garage next to their cars if they don't want to do that.
Attorney Morse?
So the section on home occupations that Commissioner Miller is referring to, it says 25% of the total floor area of the principal and or accessory building, which, leaves it kind of up in the air. I would say, if we use the word "and" there, principal and accessory building, that they're looking at that together, and that the intent is to limit, the overall space that's being used for the home occupation on the property itself. But if you use the "or," then it's your interpretation before that 25% of each building. So that may be something that we want to address and decide either "and" or.
I mean, if you were to have 30% of a lot size and 25% of that could be an office, that might be a bit excessive if we were going to do the "and" interpretation. And that might not be what the village wants.
I think that would end up that if you're using the square footage of the main dwelling as part of your percentage, that's pretty much going to force most of the home office use into the main dwelling. I don't know that I really want to go down this road that much. I think this ends up being a personal choice about how much space you want your constructed lot. Sorry, didn't phrase that very well. I think it's a personal choice about how much of your house and accessory structures you want to devote to your personal business. I don't imagine that when we're doing a purchase inspection that we're going around measuring how much space is being used for what. It looks like a bedroom, it's a bedroom. It looks like a den, it's being used as a den. It's an office, it's being used as an office. Unless you've got a manufacturing facility in there, it's going to be pretty vague and it just looks like standard home use.
Dr. Appice, can you tell us how, I have an idea how you interpret that sentence. Can you tell us how you interpret it?
I'm looking at it as 25% of the principal structure. And if they use the garage, then you'd be looking at it in the aggregate and 25% of the aggregate of the house and the garage.
It's not what I expected.
So that means that if you had a large lot, a R1AA lot, 30% of that is like 31, roughly to 3,200 square feet. And if you applied 25%, and you said, well, you can have a home office that's up to 25% of that 3,200 feet, that's, what is that? 800. 800, that's like 4 offices or 8 or 6 offices. I mean, a standard office is like 11 by 11 or something, right?
I would know, I'm in a cubicle.
I know, it's true.
Also, you've highlighted it, and maybe that can be included for clarification when it comes back. Director App, at the board meeting, you made a statement. You said an amendment might be needed to clarify that offices are okay in coach houses. Were you able to look into whether that amendment was needed?
It talks about it being for residential use. So home occupations are part of a residential use per our use standards. So I don't necessarily know that we need to explicitly say office uses, but we could say home office if we wanted to clarify it some more.
Okay.
So, but I think residential use is pretty broad, but that is specifically speaking about landmark coach houses when we talk about that. So maybe we need to carve out something for non-landmark coach houses to specifically say a home office, since it does have that area above the parking.
Attorney Morris.
And that kind of brings me back to Commissioner Miller. You said you were confused about my comments of garages versus pool houses. And so looking at section 10.7.3 of the zoning code, which is accessory structures and uses, within that broader definition of accessory structures and uses, there's specific provisions on coach houses. There's specific provisions on accessory structures in residential districts, accessory structures in business districts, and then specific provisions on garages and their design requirements. And so what I was saying is, if we are just dealing with plumbing and garages, that we just utilize the garage design requirements section and put the limitations there.
All right.
Okay.
I do wonder, though, if we want to make people have their home offices in either their garage or their home, and not their pool house or their greenhouse or their gazebo or whatever other building they want to build, or their shed, as in Monty Python.
Well, nothing's stopping someone from bringing a laptop into any of those places and using it as their home office. I mean, I think, but I kind of like to get back to like, what are we doing about garages? To me, that's we haven't decided on that issue yet. So, I mean, if it seems that most people are in agreement that we want to say something about it. So if we could knock that one off, then we could probably go a little bit further afield. But that's a real, that's kind of a specific thing that the board asked us to look at. So I'd like to get that off the table.
So you were garbled when you said that. Were you talking about storage?
No, I'm talking about plumbing in garages.
Okay. I think
I'd like to decide on what we're going to do about that.
So my sense was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're keeping to garage accessory structures and saying sinks only. Am I correct in that assessment?
That's my view, but are we, I guess I misunderstood the process. Are we going to make that recommendation to the board now in the form of any any formal text amendment? Are we going to take a vote on it, or are we just going to say this is where we go? Because I guess I misunderstood. Because yeah, that's fine.
And I'm not trying to speak for anyone but myself, but I think that's where the majority of this group is going. If we're going to do a text amendment, then I think we should address all three issues that chairperson identified. But I think it's a speak now if you have other thoughts on the plumbing issue. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I misunderstood where we were going.
So this will go back to the board, and then if they're okay, we will have a public hearing and then vote on our recommendations to go to the board for final text amendment changes. Attorney Mars?
Okay.
Right, and so I don't think you guys need to actually come up with specific text amendment language tonight. We just need the recommendations, and then between myself and staff, we can craft those into the actual text amendments.
We're getting consensus and direction tonight, hopefully. So the next bucket is storage over, currently the code says you can only have storage over your cars. And then the question from staff is, do we want to change that? And if so, to what? So Commissioner Miller had the question, Director App, to what? What other uses could you foresee?
So I guess that's kind of the question is, do we want to just have it be offices? Do we want to be a little bit more generic and say residential uses? And then if we're having the restriction that it can only have a sink, then obviously it can't become, a dwelling unit. Coach houses specifically say it can be an accessory dwelling unit. Whereas this would, right, the landmark ones, whereas this one would just say it could be utilized for other residential uses or something along those lines. So if they wanted to have, the teens hangout room or their yoga studio or, their home office, those would all be on the table. Although honestly, if I want to do yoga, it's going to be hard enough to get me to do it, let alone go across the driveway into my accessory garage and do it. So maybe not a yoga studio.
Get some steps in.
I was more concerned about the getting up into the narrow and short and angled space, but honestly,
Somewhere, dog, you don't need that much room.
I think Commissioner May, and like I said, I'm not trying to take away your thunder or put words in your mouth, but I think he's already addressed the difficulties and the complexities of designing a space that is habitable above the vehicles and all the other code issues. And these are more building code issues, not zoning code, that go with that. And I don't really see the benefit in us putting further definition on storage space above your vehicles. I'm not following the benefit.
I'll push back on that a little bit because we did do okay, it didn't sound very professional, but we did changes to the code related to the mean height, the sidewall height, where we measure it to, allowing dormers, but still limiting the maximum part of the dormers, all in an effort to allow for additional space above the parking area. Granted, when we were talking about that, it was in context of people looking to do lifts in their garages, but we still have made it possible to kind of provide additional headroom, for lack of a better word, above parking areas by allowing those dormers and still some restriction on it. So I think if somebody were to build a new garage and they were to build it with the standards that we have in place now, there is some chance that there could be usable area above the parking area.
And no offense taken at the pushback. It's good. Thank you for that clarification. I still don't see how it benefits us to further define that space. And the moment we call it habitable or convertible or the moment we make it more formalized, the more we have to get into defining all the rules and restrictions that go with it. And I would rather it is simply a storage space. And if you want to take your computer up to your garage dormer, you're welcome to do so. I'm not keeping you from doing that, and we aren't, and putting that lift up there does not do that either. The option is there. I still don't see the benefit in saying anything more about it than just leaving it as storage space.
Yeah, it's to the homeowner's benefit to call it inactive storage and to use it however they see fit. I mean, that's what we advise our commercial clients all the time is inactive storage. It's going to be, once you're inspected, you go ahead and use this however you see fit. The second you start to codify exactly what a space is used for, then you have to regulate how that space is used. You have to then rate, you have to provide egress, you have to start, now you're building stairs. If someone wants a ladder up to a loft space that they've got in the garage where they can take a book and a laptop, that's on them. That's their own home space.
But for saying it's only storage, they can't use it however they see fit legally.
Well,
And
we
it's
call it
their
inactive
property.
storage. Yeah. It's
you're
permitted as inactive storage, but people tend to use inactive storage in many different ways.
So now it's my turn to push back. We're telling property owners, yeah, you have all this property space. You paid for it, you built it. You just can't use it. You can't exercise in there. You can't paint in there. You can't read in there. It's their property.
No, I'm saying you can do any of those things in that space. It's just when we call that, say, office, now you've got to build a staircase to that office. You've got to make sure that staircase meets code. As opposed to if it's just a guy going up there on a ladder with his laptop, he can use it however he sees fit. We're not governing exactly what his egress is like, and we're not saying anything beyond this is your space to use it how you like.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Miller?
What is Riverside's stricture on whatever it's called, floor area? I mean, at what point would it be considered a livable space? How much does there have to be a certain amount of headroom? Because that also goes into this whole idea of 25% of square footage. If you have a garage that can only have a 16-foot peaked roof, that's not considering flat roofs. If your house has a flat roof and you want to have a flat roof garage, but if you can only have 16 feet as your peaked roof, it seems like there wouldn't be enough headspace, even with a couple dormers, to make that livable space. So is there some kind of a regulatory restriction on what's livable space or what's counted as square footage?
Usually residential code clearances are 6'8" to 7 feet, depending on the municipality. So if you get right down to it, you can, and this is where it goes against you to call it livable space as opposed to inactive storage, is you'd only have a very small, narrow area that meets that 7-foot head clearance.
Is there some requirement for ventilation or a window or something like that in that little space?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, light and vent qualifies for anything that's considered habitable space. That's why, it comes right back to just saying that this is a storage space and that's the best you're going to call it as, but you go ahead and knock yourself out if you wanted to go ahead and use it as a reading loft.
The other point is this only, as the code is written now, it's only referring to the part directly above where the vehicles are parked. So if you had a larger garage and you had another part of the garage where it's your workshop or something and the vehicles aren't parked there, presumably you could have a second floor there if you wanted to. And this wouldn't stop you from doing that the way it's written now. I mean, I agree that it should, I don't see why you wouldn't just keep it as it is and limit it to storage space for the area above vehicle parking spaces in a detached residential garage.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yeah, I agree. I don't see any reason to change the code. I think that it allows sufficient use.
Okay. Commissioner Hennigan?
I also would leave it as is.
Okay. And to steal one of Commissioner Hennigan's prior questions, has anybody asked you for a variation, or Director F, has anybody asked you, are there alternate uses for that space?
Like I said, it's just been when there's been existing coach houses that are not landmarked. There have been people that have wanted to convert that space, or add, if it didn't have a bathroom in it, be able to add a bathroom in it, utilize it in different ways. So that's really been the push as of late, is when you kind of have those spaces that are kind of already there, but maybe deteriorated, or, haven't been deactivated.
Well, we have direction on that one. And the third one is the maximum accessory building area on page, I don't have a page on the PDF. In the memo, page 9 of 11.
If I may, it's 10-7-3 6E.
Okay. So the question is, do we want to keep it as is? Do we want to keep it to 12%? Do we want to have a maximum square foot? Do we want to lower it to a different percentage?
I'll start. I would leave it as it is. As Director Apt noted, it's already generous compared to our neighbors. Yes, it is a restriction on, as Commissioner Miller noted, it does not allow for the full use of the 12% for someone who has the larger lot. But I'm not sure that that's that much of a detriment when you start talking about what 800 square feet represents. It's a 20 by 40 space. It's fairly large. I don't know that there's that much benefit to us in allowing more impervious area, which is what that represents. I think leaving the code as is acceptable.
And the 20 by 40 square foot footprint, that's basically a 4-car garage and change. So it's a fairly significantly sized building right there in terms of footprint. There's really not going to be many people at all who can even approach this and put it in a decent spot on the lot.
That doesn't allow much storage space, does it? On the ground?
Not much storage space. No, but you can comfortably fit 4 cars in 20 by 40 plus, say, half a parking space for storage.
This 12% though does apply to all accessory structures. It's not just the garage. So let's say you have a garage, let's say you have a greenhouse that's, I don't know, a couple hundred square feet. Let's say you have a garden shed to store your garden stuff in. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that if we're going to do 12%, it should apply to everyone, because we're still having the 30% limitation on total building coverage. So if we're allowing 30% total building coverage, why should the village care if it's 12% accessory buildings and 18% principal building, or principal building 22% and the accessory structures 8%?
I think that you can come to us with a variance. I think the basic idea is that there is a primary structure on a property, and you can have as many other accessory structures as you want and work within the space that you have. I'm not, as Commissioner May noted, it's a pretty big area to be available for use for your design purposes. I'm not seeing that we're harming people with a cap.
Well, looking at Director App's memo, if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, 12% is 600 square feet. If you have a 7,000 square foot lot, 12% is 840 square foot. So you're already restricted there because you're capped out at 800. If you have a 10,500 square foot lot, you're capped out. So we have two categories of lot sizes here that are already restricted. So I don't understand why we're capping out at 800 square feet when we have so much variation in lot sizes. I don't see how one size fits all here, when we still have the restrictions of building coverage and impervious surface already there. To your point, Commissioner Marhol.
That's a good point. I think when we look at the 10,500 number, that's if you use 12%, not you specifically, but if the owner uses 12%, that's 1,200 feet. That's basically another small house. And I think I'm going to go back to the idea that the idea of the standard was to maintain, here's a principal structure, that's where you live, and then you have accessory structures on top of that. Mostly where I'm going with this is the 800 square feet doesn't bother me. I think it's adequate for our purposes. There's nothing else I should say.
Other commissioners?
I think that this is Teresa, or Commissioner Pelletier. I think the 800 square feet is adequate. I think a 4-car garage is a fairly significant size. And I don't think that the fact that you have a larger lot necessarily means that you should be getting that much larger a structure allowed. You know, to some extent, I think that you should have more green space or preserve more of it. And I know that we have a 30% coverage, but I think that the 800 is adequate, and I don't think it needs to be increased just because the lot size gets a little bit larger.
This sounds to me kind of like a backdoor way to limit the amount of building on a lot below 30% for large lots. And if we want to go that direction, I don't object. I think during our garages discussion of a year or so ago, I made clear I don't like large garages. I don't like 3-car garages. I don't like 4-car garages. Some people find them necessary. But if we want to limit the amount of impervious surface on larger lots, then we could reduce it below 30%. Because we're not stopping someone from building on 30% of their larger lot. The code allows that. We're just saying you can't do it with accessory buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, like, if you have a larger lot, that probably means, that could mean you have a larger family. That could mean you have more vehicles, you have more cars. It could mean you have more people doing different things, like an artist or a workshop or a pool house or whatever. And to restrict people from using that full 12%, which seems highly unlikely that anyone will ever max out to that. But to restrict that, to put that restriction on people, seems inequitable.
I'm not sure it's inequitable. You have or the owner, make it more general, the owner has the option to make their principal residence bigger, and they can capture that additional impervious coverage on their principal structure. I don't think we're harming or preventing people from doing the majority of what they want to do.
Commissioner Matthews?
I agree with Commissioner Marhol. I think the 800 is is fine. And as he suggests, repeatedly, there's always the variance process. Somebody wants to go to a little bit over, but I'm fine with. I don't see any reason to change this at this point. First, and kind of going back to a lot of these changes seem to be stemming from issues that arose during the pandemic, and I don't want to change code based on that. So I'm completely with Joel in that area. I think it's fine as it is for now, and if we have issues, we can look at it some other time.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Based on the information that Director Apt provided us, it seems like our regulations are already more permissive than many of our neighbors. And in addition to that, the way we have it with a percentage maximum and an overall cap is very consistent with what I'm used to seeing in communities across the region, where you'll have a percentage allowed up to a maximum of a certain square footage to make sure you don't have gigantic garage structures. Most communities do not want to see those. So this seems perfectly reasonable to me as is. I don't see a need to change it.
Yes, on the Director Apt.
I did get a note here. President Sells is asking why impervious surface limitations wouldn't be sufficient to regulate accessory building size. Why do we have to have an additional limit on accessory buildings in the aggregate? So I don't know if that's something else we want to flesh out a little bit. I think on my end, just from a planning and zoning perspective, you are typically going to have some sort of regulation on either building coverage or limits on accessory building coverage, just to make sure that accessory buildings are not going to be larger than the principal building. And that's typically the reason you do that. Impervious surface is looking at, when you're looking at impervious surfaces, you're really looking more at preserving green space on a lot versus kind of looking at weighing accessory structures being greater than a principal structure. So if any of the commissioners have any comments on that.
I think it goes back to what Commissioner Hennigan noted, and that's the.
I think it goes back to what Commissioner Hennigan noted, and that's the. I think it goes back to what Commissioner Hennigan noted, and that's.
Ben, can you mute yourself? President Sells? Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I'm not used to hearing my own voice. I'd rather not. I'm going to defer to Commissioner Hennigan's comments, and that it's to avoid what's perceived as the overly large accessory structure. I think that's what it mostly comes down to.
So then aren't we kind of codifying design?
I think to some degree we do that all the time.
I think we're codifying massing more than we are design, or massing of the structures. So I mean, what we could consider, since I do think that the size to allow something, a single structure, a single accessory structure larger than 800 feet is not something maybe we want to do. We could consider having that limitation on any single accessory structure, but allowing a percentage of the larger lots, allowing the 12% total for the larger lots. So maybe they'll have two structures, but none of them can be greater than 800 feet.
I would support
That's
that.
a good idea.
President Sells?
Yeah, I'm sorry about the muting issue a second ago. I mean, the kind of what brought this up is I'm the person that got the complaint about the 800 square feet. Director Apt completely accurately portrayed what the nature of the complaint was. But I guess what my question is going to is, and this ties into with what I think Trustee Gisa was getting at. I can see a situation where if you have a very large lot where you have a primary dwelling, you have a garage, maybe you have a garden shed, but then somebody wants to build a separate office, home office. It is, so long as you're not exceeding the impervious surface restriction, what is the policy reason to prohibit a property owner from doing that?
So I think the policy decision was made back when they did the residential zoning rewrite, and they created that 30% building coverage, that they wanted to limit the amount of larger structures on a lot. And then coupled with that, then there ended up being the further restriction on garages, accessory structures, and limiting those to the 12% or 800 square feet. So I think as part of that overall discussion, that board at that time had made that policy decision that rather than just having an overall coverage for everything on a lot, they wanted to restrict building coverage separately from impervious surface coverage.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding this then. May I continue, Chairperson Mateo? I thought that what you're talking about limits the total amount, the total square footage or footprint, the total footprint of all accessory structures combined cannot exceed 12% or 800 square feet, whichever is smaller. And my question is, why? So long as, if I have a half-acre lot, so long as I am not building more than the impervious surface restriction, what difference does it make? It's my property. Why can't I have a garage and a garden shed and a home office in addition to my primary dwelling, so long as I don't exceed the impervious surface restriction?
Well, I guess one, we have building coverage and we have impervious surface in addition to the restriction on accessory buildings not exceeding that 12% or 800 square feet at the max. So you've got, the first level is if you're looking at doing a garage or a garage and shed, you're limited to 12% of the lot or 800 square feet, which, not to exceed 800 square feet. Then you take the next step up from that and you're looking at your whole lot, and we have the restriction that all of the buildings or structures that are above grade can't exceed 30% of your lot. So then now we're looking at your house, and we're looking at your deck, and we're looking at your garage, and we're looking at your shed, and we're looking at your above ground pool, and those things in the aggregate can't exceed 30%. Then we're looking even more globally as anything on your lot that's not allowing things to sink into the grass. So now we're looking at your driveway, we're looking at your patios, we're looking at your walkways. That can't exceed either 45% or 50% for our single family lots. When we get into, our R2 and R3, it gets into the 60 and 65% maximums for impervious surface. But so you've got these different layers into restricting how dense your lot can be built up. And so you're looking at it in accessory buildings, then you're looking at it all buildings, and then you're looking at it all structures kind of period, whether it be a patio, a driveway. So you're looking at it in layers where we're kind of regulating density for different things. So impervious surface, we're really looking at green space. With building coverage and accessory building, building maximums, you're looking at more density, kind of for, massing density, for lack of a better term off the top of my head. So again, typically your accessory building uses, you're looking at restricting those in the aggregate because you want to make sure that these are accessory to the principal unit. And then you're looking at kind of massing on the lot as a whole when you're looking at building coverage restrictions. And so for the past, 20 years, we've been regulating building coverage. Well, maybe not 20 years, but pretty close, 15 years. We've been regulating building coverage on a lot, as well as accessory buildings on a lot.
President Sells?
I mean, that was very helpful, but I still don't understand why we do it that way. I mean, so again, I go back to my original point. It's my property. And so long, I think that the village has a legitimate governmental and public interest in regulating water runoff, stormwater management, that kind of thing. And as you know, I've always been a strong proponent of that. So I totally get the impervious surface aspect of it. But beyond that, it seems to me that we're interfering with the use of a person's property the way they see fit. And then I don't want to belabor this, but I asked for this topic to be discussed, and what I'm articulating to you is exactly what I was curious about, is why we have this 12%, 800 square feet, when you could simply say you can't cover more than, whatever in the appropriate district it is, you can't cover more than X of a percentage of the lot in any way. And it seems to me that is a global solution. So I'll be silent now and let the commission continue. Thank you for bearing with me.
I think there's a couple, and I think your points are good, and in some ways it's a good policy debate. Ultimately, as you noted, the village does have an interest in maintaining a certain feel to the town, and I'm the 800 square feet, in my view right now, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of benefit to the village to revise that. There's, I suppose, one argument against changing that rule is that just owning a larger square footage of land area does not give you the privilege of additional structural mass over your neighbor who might not have as big of a piece of property. So one could argue that there's a certain amount of equitability built into that you might have 4 acres of land, but we're still going to put certain restrictions on the number and the amount and the area of the structures that you can have there to create a certain amount of similar, and I'm losing my train a little bit here, obviously, but some equitability. It's a policy decision. I'm not sure that there's a benefit to just defining everything by percentages. I think we often, in many of our regulations, we say that there is a minimum or maximum square footage to a given space. We tell everyone there's so many square feet you need to allocate to a bedroom. That's a minimum. You can't create a tenement house out of it. And then on the other side, we've got a maximum as well. Some of this comes down to and what are our goals. I don't think it's necessarily meant to reduce property rights in and of itself. Yes, it is a property right restriction, but we did that when we said you could only have so much frontage on your driveway, regardless of the lot size frontage you have. We still said you can only have 10 feet wide or whatever we came to. Please correct me, Director Apt. Even if you have 100 feet wide, you still only get 10 feet. If you have 50 feet wide, you get 10 feet. There's a certain amount of equitability that's created by that rule. I nothing else to really add to that before I get lost.
Commissioner Miller? You're muted.
I think it's clear that I am thinking the same way that President Sells is. I wanted to make a couple of other points, though. The concept of massing is interesting that Director App mentioned, and also I support the idea of perhaps having a limit on any one accessory building not being larger than, say, 800 square feet. If we're talking about massing and we're okay with a principal building being basically 2,200 square foot footprint, because that with an 800 square foot garage will get up to the 30% coverage of a 10,000 square foot lot. That's what we're talking about. Well, that mass will be visible from the street. Whereas if you have accessory buildings that go up to the 12% a large lot of 1,200 square feet, those will largely not be visible from the street. So a larger house will be more obstructive to the passerby than the accessory buildings. And I think the example that President Sells, mentioned, having, say, you already have a 3-car garage, you have a shed, and then you also want to have another building added, and to say, well, you've already gotten to your 800 square feet, sorry, you can't do that. I think that is too restrictive. That's all I have to say.
Might this dissuade detached garages on very large properties? And we haven't had the discussion yet of incentives, but could that be pulled into this issue as a way to incentivize detached garages on these properties and allowing perhaps a bigger one in those cases?
I think so. That's a whole different subject matter beyond the home office issue, but yes.
I don't think so. I think actually we probably see larger garages that are attached, to be perfectly honest. I can point to a house on Nuttall as well as a house on Riverside Road where the owners did expand their properties and build an addition that included 2 or 3 car garages. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that restricting the size of garages to, say, 800 square feet is diminishing the desire for attached versus detached. I think that's an entirely different issue. I don't think that has a significant effect on what people are deciding to do.
What are the rest of your thoughts on limiting any single building accessory structure to 800 square feet, which in some cases would allow someone to have multiple accessory structures as long as they don't exceed 12% total and meet the other provisions? I can't remember who suggested that.
Commissioner Pelletier suggested that, and I support that. I think that's a good idea.
Director App, do you see any potential downsides to that?
Not necessarily. Again, with the 30% building coverage restriction built into that, I don't necessarily see a specific issue with that.
Anybody really opposed to it? Which is okay.
I mean, really the biggest.
I don't see any
thing
reason to change the code right now. I think it's fine as written. And if I'm not certain that this is a significant issue that's truly come up. And, someone raised it, one person raised it, but I'm not sure I'm ready to completely change. And I just want to confirm again, if someone, one of these very large homes with very large property wanted to build in excess of 800 square feet, an accessory building of some type that maybe went a little bit over, could they ask for variance?
Again, with variances, we need to make sure we're remembering what our standards are. And with that, we're looking for what is a particular hardship or a practical difficulty. So I think it
Right.
can't be out of desire that I need a larger garage. There has to be some sort of situation relative either to the lot or the structures on the lot that's causing the hardship or the practical difficulty. So I don't necessarily know that I've got a really big lot means you get more when we've specifically read our code that you don't.
Right. But my question is, and I think you've answered, is yes, they can ask for a variance. Whether they get it or not is dependent on the specific circumstances. But they are absolutely able to ask for it. And to me, that's sufficient.
Seems
Okay.
we've lost Attorney Mars. I know his internet's been a little sketchy, but I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that.
Okay. Show of hands, how many are in favor of allowing more than one accessory structure as long as they don't exceed 800 square feet each? Okay, 2. So, and the rest of you, raise your hand, please, if you want only one, as is, only one accessory structure. Okay, 3 of you didn't vote. 2 of you didn't vote.
Well, we do allow more than
Not
one
vote,
accessory
but-
building.
I mean, maxing out. So let's say I have a large property. I can only build a garage to 800 square feet. I'm done. I cannot build a shed. I cannot build something for storage.
Can you rephrase your proposition?
So 1 is we leave things as are, or we change it such that if everybody meets the impervious surface and building lot requirements, if they have a large enough lot, they can build multiple accessory structures up to 12%, as long as no accessory structure is larger than 800 square feet. So how many like that one?
I am in favor of that one. I can't raise my hand.
You did earlier. I saw that. Thank you.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Been doing a lot of teaching lately.
Right.
Okay. So, 4 in favor, 2 are not. I'm not sure what my opinion is on that one, but we can ask staff to pull together some language about it, and then we can discuss it if it comes to a public hearing. We're not making any decisions right now, and we can change our minds as we think about it some more.
Can I ask a question of Director Apt?
Of course.
Is a deck an accessory structure?
It's not an accessory building.
Okay.
As we look at how it's defined here, this is for gazebos, garages, sheds, greenhouses,
Something
as
that
it's
has walls,
defined.
basically.
So it's not limited by the 12%, it's limited by the 30%.
Okay, I was just trying, I didn't understand. So something that has walls is considered a structure in essence, but if it's a flat deck, that's not an accessory structure. Okay, thank you.
I have one more related thing. If we move from this section in the code down to the next one, which, it's related to accessory structures in the business district. 1073A7E says accessory structures are limited to 70% of the area of the principal building or 800 square feet, whichever is larger. So I shared this with Director Apt yesterday, and we were both kind of scratching our heads thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. So I can read it again. Accessory structures in the business district are limited to 70% of the area of the principal building or 800 square feet, whichever is larger. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, Bank of America, I could have a huge garage. We're thinking that's probably not right. Attorney Mars, I don't know if that was shared with you. Do you have any initial thoughts on that? Putting you on the spot?
Yeah, that's the first I'm hearing of it. So it's interesting. I think you have a good point. Probably something that should be addressed.
Okay. Commissioner Marvel?
Just initial thought is that since commercial uses tend to be so much more variable and you have a garage could be a significant component of their business, say a gas station and a garage. And I'm not saying this is our current use, but storage or anything else that could be where that came from. More related to just business use and much more diversity in how structures are used.
Well, if staff can add that to the list and figure out what the norms are, and perhaps, is this what we want, or do we want to change it?
Right. One thing it might be beneficial to do is to try to, go back and find the legislative history on that and see what the reasoning was at the time.
Yeah, I looked at the date next to it, and those changes were not related to this particular item. So I don't know how you go back in time to figure out when this particular change was made. Somebody will have luck with that, I hope. Any other thoughts on these three buckets? This is a good discussion.
Just to clarify, for the size, we're looking at 800 square foot max for any individual accessory structure, 12% in the aggregate. Okay.
We're asking for that language to be available anyway.
Mhm.
Okay, we have no new business information. Our next meeting is March 24th. If we have business, Director App, can you update us on what's happening with RTA, please?
After the last steering committee meeting, they are taking all the feedback and they have begun working on some draft language. So at this point, they are hoping to have something to staff by the end of March for us to review, and then maybe a steering committee meeting then, and to the steering committee, and having the meeting in April. And then looking at June to present the draft to the village board. And then if the village board is okay with everything, or based on some of their feedback, make those revisions and then work towards a public hearing. So I would imagine probably in April is when we'll be having the next steering committee meeting. But they're currently working on drafting some language. So with that, I am leaving. So my last day is actually tomorrow here with Riverside. I'm going to be moving on to the village of Montgomery as their community development director. So they have brought in an interim planner to take my place for the time being until they can hire somebody full-time. Her name is Courtney Kashima, and she will be helping us out a couple of days a week, answering zoning questions. And if we get any variances or special uses or anything in, she'll be taking those through the process. So she will be the new liaison to you guys for the interim until they get in a new full-time person.
Well, that was the next thing on my list here. I'm very sad that you're leaving us, but happy for you for the next stage of your professional career and a shorter commute, I understand. It's been almost 7 years for us and Commissioner Pelletier. It's been a real joy to work with you, and I think we've accomplished a lot. But I'm sorry to see you go, but happy for you. So thank you for everything you've done for the commission. And I wish you luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's been a lot of fun working with you guys. And I am, this is the commission that obviously as planners, we like to work with it. But I think you guys, and really, obviously I've seen several iterations of this commission over 7 years, but it's always been a very thoughtful commission that takes its job seriously and takes the time to look at things and asks thoughtful questions and really tries to think through the issues. So I've always really appreciated about this commission. So it's been great to work with you guys over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, please call the roll. One last time.
All right, Commissioner Marhol,
Aye.
Commissioner Hennigan,
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews,
Aye.
Commissioner Pelletier,
Aye.
Commissioner May,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chairperson Mateo.
Aye. Attorney Mars, did you need to do one last check on anything legally?
Nope, I'm here. Thank you.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It was a long meeting, but we got a lot done. Be safe out there, and maybe we'll see you March 24th.